I stood at the entrance of the manor, my reflection caught in the glass doors, as the maitre d' glanced down at the reservation list for the third time. The quiet hum of laughter and silverware from inside felt miles away, like a world I was no longer welcome in. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, his tone polite but distant. "Your name's not on the guest list for the Mitchell family dinner." The words stung, not because of their finality, but because of how familiar they felt. A subtle rejection, wrapped in formality. "There must be some mistake," I replied, though my voice betrayed a quiet tremor. "This is my in-laws' anniversary celebration. My husband should already be inside." That's when I saw her. Evelyn Mitchell, in her designer gown, gliding toward me like a woman stepping onto a stage she believed was hers alone. She smiled, the kind of smile that never quite touched her eyes. "Is there a problem, Sherry?" she asked, the edge of mock concern lacing every syllable. "It seems my name isn't on the list," I said, steadying my breath, willing myself not to shrink beneath the weight of so many watching eyes. Evelyn tilted her head, performing the role of the gracious hostess with chilling precision. "How odd. Must be some clerical mix-up." Her gaze flicked dismissively to the crowded dining room. "But as you can see, we're absolutely full tonight. Perhaps somewhere more familiar would suit you better." It wasn't just a dismissal. It was a well-rehearsed strike, a reminder of where she thought I belonged. The whispers started, like a ripple, subtle yet sharp. 5 years of marriage, and still, I was just the girl who once waited tables. To Evelyn, no amount of love or work or sacrifice could scrub that away. "We'll save you some dessert," she added, her smirk sealing the humiliation she expected me to carry out the door. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed against my chest. The years of trying, the countless moments of swallowing pride for the sake of peace. But then something shifted. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was clarity. But I didn't flinch. I laughed. Not a bitter laugh. A real, from the gut, unexpected laugh that startled even me. Evelyn paused mid-step, her script momentarily useless. "You're right, Evelyn," I said, my voice calm and certain. "This place isn't for me. But not for the reasons you believe." I turned, my heart pounding, not from shame, but from the unfamiliar thrill of choosing myself in a room that never had. I walked toward the back of the restaurant, where a familiar face lit up in genuine surprise. "Sherry, what a surprise!" Richard Anderson greeted, pulling me into a warm embrace that reminded me of who I was before the Mitchell name had tried to redefine me. "There's been a mix-up with the guest list," I said lightly, as if this were just an amusing anecdote and not a quiet act of rebellion. "A mix-up," he frowned. "But you're the one who. Can we talk in private?" I interrupted gently, catching sight of Evelyn hurrying toward us, her mask of composure cracking. Inside Richard's office, the walls felt like they could breathe with me, a stark contrast to the suffocating expectations outside. I sank into a chair, exhaling years of frustration into that quiet space. "Sherry, what's going on?" Richard asked, concern threading his words. "Tonight was supposed to be your big moment." I smiled, though it carried the weight of more battles than he knew. "Evelyn's been trying to keep me out of her family since day one. Tonight was just her latest performance." He shook his head, bewildered. "Doesn't she know who you really are to this place?" "She knows what she wants to know," I replied softly. "But she's about to learn that I'm not here as a guest tonight." 3 years ago, when the manor needed a vision to match its ambition, I had quietly invested every cent I'd saved, working alongside Richard to shape its future. Not for prestige or approval, but because creating something meaningful had always been my anchor. Tonight was supposed to be the night I stepped into the light, not for validation, but to honor the journey. And yet, here I was standing at a new crossroad. One that had nothing to do with Evelyn and everything to do with how I chose to respond. "What are you going to do?" Richard asked, his tone somewhere between a challenge and a cheer. I smiled, gently this time. "We've been perfecting that seasonal menu for months. I think tonight's as good a night as any to share it with the people who matter." As I reached for the chef's coat hanging on the wall, I felt an unexpected calm settle in. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. This was about claiming space, not through grand declarations, but through the simple act of showing up fully unafraid. My phone buzzed. A message from Andrew. Where are you? My mom says you canceled last minute. A familiar ache tugged at my chest. His loyalty had always been torn between love and the invisible strings his family pulled. But tonight, I wasn't waiting for anyone else to untangle them. I typed back, I'm here. Trust me. Stepping out of the office, I saw Andrew, his frustration visible as he argued with Evelyn near their table. My gaze softened. For all his faults, his heart had never wavered for me. But this wasn't his fight to resolve. Wearing my chef's coat like a second skin, I walked through the dining room. The murmurs rose again, but this time, they didn't pierce. I wasn't the outsider anymore. I was simply where I belonged. Evelyn's face drained of color as she noticed me. What is the meaning of this? She hissed, her composure cracking like thin ice. Richard appeared at my side, his voice a calm anchor in the storm. Mrs. Mitchell, allow me to formally introduce Sherry Johnson, partner, and the Manor's new executive chef. The room stilled. For the first time since I'd known her, Evelyn had no words. Andrew approached, his eyes a mix of apology and awe. Sherry, I didn't know. I touched his arm gently. Not now. Tonight is still worth celebrating. As I turned toward the kitchen, a hand caught my wrist. Franklin Mitchell, Andrew's father, his face suddenly void of its usual charm. You can't be Richard's partner, he whispered, his voice strained. That would mean you know about. He stopped himself, but the crack had formed. A fissure in the facade. For a brief second, I felt the old reflex to seize this as a moment of victory, to strike back. But I let it pass. Whatever secrets the Mitchells were guarding would reveal themselves in time. I didn't need to force it. Tonight, my victory wasn't about exposing anyone else. It was about stepping into who I was, with or without their permission. I didn't flinch when Franklin grabbed my arm. I had learned over the years how to keep my voice steady even when my heart was racing. Know about what, Mr. Franklin? I asked, calm but clear, as if daring him to cross that line. His hand recoiled like my skin had burned him. For a moment, the ever-composed Franklin Mitchell stood there exposed, guilt and panic written all over his face. Nothing. Forget it, he mumbled, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. But the truth doesn't unring itself. Once you hear the cracks, you can't pretend the walls are still intact. I had spent years brushing off their awkward glances, the way conversations turned brittle when I mentioned restaurants, Evelyn's smug silence, Franklin's stiff politeness. I used to think it was just their way of reminding me I didn't belong. But now, the puzzle was rearranging itself. This isn't the time or place, Franklin muttered, his eyes darting around. There are too many people. Exactly, I said, my voice soft but anchored. That's why I won't make a scene. But this conversation isn't over. I walked away, feeling the weight of his gaze on my back, but I didn't look back. There was a time when their approval mattered, when I mistook their condescension for standards I had to meet. But tonight, that weight was starting to shift. In the kitchen, everything felt familiar. The clang of pots, the rhythmic orders, the heat and focus. It was the only place where I ever felt safe under this roof. Ready for your big night, chef? Michael, my sous chef, grinned as he passed me an apron. More than ever, I replied, pulling it on. The fabric felt like armor. Let's get this menu out. As the kitchen roared to life, I caught a glimpse of the Mitchells through the pass. Evelyn's mask of perfection had slipped, her smile brittle, her posture stiff. And Franklin, he looked like a man trapped between two ticking clocks. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired. But beneath the exhaustion, something quieter was growing. Resolve. Andrew appeared at my side, weaving through the controlled chaos until he found me. Sherry, we need to talk, he said, his expression etched with guilt. I looked at him, the boyish charm that used to disarm me now replaced with something raw. Your mother tried to humiliate me tonight, I said quietly. It wasn't an accusation. It was just a fact. I know. And I swear I didn't know what she was planning. His voice cracked, then dropped lower. But there's something worse. My hands stilled. I overheard Dad on the phone, Andrew continued. He's scared you'll find out the truth about how the manor was really funded. The words floated in the air for a moment before sinking in. I thought back to the vague stories, the half-answers whenever I asked Richard how he managed to open such an ambitious place 15 years ago. Franklin's legal connections. The Mitchells' obsession with image. What truth, Andrew? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. I don't know exactly. But Dad mentioned documents, something Richard has hidden. And your father's name came up. A cold wave rippled through me. My father, who vanished when I was 12, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a hole in my mother's heart. I hadn't spoken his name in years. I need to speak to Richard, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Distract your father. Andrew nodded, though I could see the fear in his eyes. Be careful, Sherry. My family doesn't like losing control. I smiled faintly. Neither do I. But I'm done playing their game. I found Richard near the dining room entrance, giving quiet instructions to the staff. His expression was calm, but I learned to see past that long ago. I need the key to your safe, I said, stepping into his space. I think it's time I stopped being the only one in the dark. He didn't ask what I meant. He just sighed, the kind of sigh that carries years of weight. Some truths are safer buried, Sherry. Not for me, I said steady. I've lived in the shadow of your family's secrets long enough. I need to know why. For a long moment, Richard said nothing. Then slowly, he reached into his pocket and pressed a small key into my hand. In the false bottom of my desk drawer. Red folder. Just know, it will change how you see everything. The key felt cold, but my grip was firm. I had been looking for answers my whole life. I wasn't about to stop now. As I turned the corner toward the office, Evelyn blocked my path. You think you're clever, don't you? She hissed, stepping into my space. I didn't shrink back. I didn't need to. I think I'm tired of pretending I don't see through you, I said quietly. Tonight isn't about ruining anything, Evelyn. It's about facing what's already broken. Her lips curled, a mixture of rage and fear twisting her features. You have no idea what you're walking into. I'll find out, I replied, brushing past her. One way or another. I didn't notice Franklin slipping away, but somehow, I wasn't surprised when he came after me. The office felt suffocating as I closed the door behind me. My hands trembled as I found the drawer Richard had mentioned. The false bottom clicked open, and there it was, a red folder, edges worn, like it had been waiting for me all along. Inside, the past came flooding back in fragments. Financial records, old photographs, yellowed newspaper clippings. One headline caught me like a gut punch. Local businessman disappears amid fraud investigation. There was a picture. A man smiling, opening a modest restaurant. The smile I barely remembered but could never forget. My father. The door burst open behind me. Franklin stood there, breathless, his facade in pieces. Give me those documents, he demanded. But the words barely registered. My world had already shifted. Why is my father in these files? I asked, the question barely leaving my lips. What does he have to do with the manor? Franklin collapsed into the nearest chair, as if the weight of the truth was finally too much for even him to carry. Your father didn't abandon you, Sherry, he said, his voice hollow. I helped him disappear. The room tilted. My chest ached, but somehow I kept breathing. He was honest, too honest, Franklin continued. He found discrepancies in my clients' accounts. Dangerous men. He wanted to expose them. I tried to stop him, but he wouldn't back down. I closed my eyes, seeing flashes of my father's face, his quiet integrity. He refused the hush money, so we made a deal. He'd vanish. Start over somewhere safe. In exchange, I promised his family, your family, would be protected. A lifetime of Evelyn's disdain, of subtle slights and cold dismissals, suddenly made sense. I was never just an outsider. I was a reminder. A loose thread in their tightly woven facade. Franklin looked up, his mask shattered. Evelyn never knew the full story. She only knew your name meant trouble. When Andrew brought you home, I panicked. I didn't respond. There was too much to process. But somewhere, beneath the heartbreak, a quiet understanding was starting to bloom. They had spent years trying to diminish me, erase my presence. But I was still here. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of their truths. The door opened again. Andrew stood there, Richard and Evelyn trailing behind him, their faces drained of the composure they always wore like armor. "What's going on here?" Andrew asked, his eyes darting from his father to me, sensing the weight of something he wasn't ready for. I didn't say a word. Instead, I handed him the folder. He took it slowly, scanning the pages as his face shifted, confusion giving way to disbelief, then a slow, rising tide of anger that made his hands tremble. "You knew about this?" he asked Evelyn, his voice quieter than I expected, but heavy with betrayal. For once, Evelyn had no rehearsed answer. She shook her head, lips parted, but no sound came. The woman who always had something sharp to say was, at last, silent. It was Richard who broke the stillness. "Sherry's father came to me years ago," he began, his voice softened by something that almost resembled regret. "He entrusted me with his life savings to open this restaurant. But there was a condition, that when the time came, this place would belong to her. He's been following her journey ever since. Quietly. Always proud, even if he couldn't come back." My heart stilled. "He's alive." Richard nodded. "Living under a new name, in a quiet city. He never stopped thinking about you." The room felt suspended, like the world had paused to catch its breath. But in the distance, beyond the office walls, a wave of applause rippled through the dining room. Life, still moving forward, waiting. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, straightened my spine. The weight on my shoulders was still there, but it had shifted. It no longer felt like a burden, but something I could carry, with pride. "We have guests to serve," I said, my voice steady. Andrew reached for my hand, hesitant. "You don't have to put on a brave face tonight." "I'm not," I replied, meeting his eyes. "This isn't about pretending anymore. It's about honoring the journey that brought me here. My father didn't sacrifice his life for me to hide in shadows. I belong in that kitchen." I left them standing there, walking back through the threshold of the kitchen, not as the outsider, not as the woman they tried to break, but as the chef who had rebuilt herself, piece by piece. "Chef, the guests are asking about the main course," Michael said, apron already dusted with flour, eyes bright with anticipation. I smiled, a genuine, deep-rooted smile. "Tonight, we're changing the menu," I announced. "We're serving the dishes my father used to make. The ones that remind us why we cook, not for prestige, but for the stories we share at a table." The kitchen erupted into motion, and I let myself feel every sound, every scent. The sizzle of garlic and olive oil, the rhythmic chop of knives, the laughter of a team that had stood beside me through every fight. Out in the dining room, the Mitchell family sat at their table, their world quietly unraveling while mine was being stitched back together, with flavors, with memories, with purpose. Each dish that left the past wasn't just a plate of food. It was a chapter of my life, of resilience, of love that refused to be silenced, of roots rediscovered, not buried in shame, but celebrated. By the end of the night, as the last plates were cleared and the hum of satisfied conversations lingered in the air, Richard approached me quietly, slipping an envelope into my hand. "Your father will be at my house tomorrow," he said, his tone gentle, almost reverent. "He's been waiting for this moment." For a while, I couldn't move. I just held the envelope, feeling its weight. It wasn't heavy with paper. It was heavy with years lost, but also with years still to come. As I was gathering my things, Evelyn appeared. The cold edge in her was gone. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was smaller, yet honest. "I never imagined you had such strength," she said. "Franklin will answer for what he's done. But I want you to know, I regret how I treated you." I looked at her, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. People lash out when they're protecting the fragile walls they've built around their fears. She had spent her life guarding a world built on lies. I had spent mine learning how to survive outside of it. "I hope one day you find peace too, Evelyn," I said softly, and I meant it. Later that night, as Andrew and I locked up the restaurant, a thought settled into my heart with a quiet, comforting certainty. Life doesn't always give us the answers when we ask for them. Sometimes, it makes us walk through fire, endure silences, and confront truths that shatter us, only to reveal the strength we never knew we had. Evelyn tried to keep me from attending a dinner. She had no idea that her cruelty would uncover years of secrets, tear down illusions, and, without intending to, lead me back to the father I thought I'd lost forever. As I stood at the door of the manor, watching the lights dim for the night, I felt something shift inside me. A warmth, a quiet flame that wasn't about payback or bitterness. It was hope. It was the quiet, steady belief that no matter how long we're kept in the dark, we can always find our way back to the light. And when we do, we don't just survive, we become something stronger. Have you ever been through something like this? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. Thanks so much for watching Rise with Sherry. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe for more.